picture it. I mean, it is arguably one of the most famous, most visually striking historical events ever recorded.
Oh, without a doubt.
The parting of the sea, right. When you hear that, your brain almost certainly goes straight to the cinematic version.
Yeah, you instantly picture the Red Sea.
Exactly. You picture these towering, like, impossible walls of blue water held back like glass on either side, and this cast of thousands just marching across a vast, sandy ocean floor into an endless desert.
Right. It's a very specific, very ingrained image.
But what if the geography, the physics, and actually the very words used to describe this event have been completely misunderstood?
Which is a massive claim to make.
It is. But that is our mission for today. We are doing a deep dive into a really fascinating, frankly radical theory proposed by Dr. Khaled Waleed.
Yeah, and we should be clear right up front for you listening. We are unpacking his source texts objectively here.
Right. This is a textual and theoretical exploration. We are not taking a theological stance or endorsing any specific belief systems today.
Exactly. We are just analyzing this highly intricate theory from his work. And his claim is that a Red Sea crossing is, well, he says it's both scientifically and geographically impossible.
Which just sounds crazy at first. But he argues the true stage for this ancient drama was actually the Dead Sea.
Yeah, it completely forces a total reevaluation of the map of antiquity.
It really does. And I think the perfect starting point for his framework is the language.
The terminology, yeah.
Yeah.
It's foundational to everything he argues.
Because in everyday conversation, we use water terminology interchangeably all the time. We say ocean, sea, lake, river, and we just blur the lines.
Right. Water is water to most people.
Exactly. But Waleed's foundational argument is that the ancient Quranic text does not blur those lines at all.
Not even a little bit. He says it acts almost like a chemical taxonomy.
A chemical taxonomy, right. Like if you misclassify a chemical in a lab, your experiment explodes.
That's a great way to put it. And Relly is basically arguing that by misclassifying these ancient Arabic water terms, traditionalists essentially exploded the historical map.
They just blew up the geography. So he identifies this severe interpretive drift over the centuries, right?
Yeah, exactly. And to correct it, he categorizes three very specific terms from the text.
Okay, let's break those down. What's the first one?
So the first is ma, M-A-A, which translates simply as water.
Just water.
Right. But in Waleed's strict framework, ma never, ever refers to a salty ocean. It strictly and exclusively denotes sweet, potable, life-giving water.
So drinkable water.
Exactly. Rainwater, fresh streams, the fresh flooding of river. If the text says ma, you can drink it.
Okay, that makes sense. Sweet water is Ma, but the crossing and, the drowning of the army, that didn't happen in Ma.
No, it didn't.
Yeah.
The text uses a second, completely different term for the location of Pharaoh's demise, which is Yam.
Yam, Y-M-M. And this is where the map starts to shift, right?
Big time. Because Yam is the absolute antithesis of Ma. Waleed's analysis of the root word defines Yam as a closed basin.
Okay.
An enclosed lake of salty, harsh, completely undrinkable water.
So it's not just salty, it has to be closed off.
Right. And the text refers to it elsewhere with descriptors like ajaj, which means bitter and salty. A yam is essentially a dead end.
It doesn't flow out into anything else.
Exactly. It does not flow out into a global ocean. It is completely geographically isolated.
Okay. But then we have a third term that pops up, which is bar. And most people, most translations just say that means sea.
Yeah, bar is the most common translation for sea.
But if yam is so specific, why does the text also use bar? I mean, doesn't that just invite the exact confusion Waleed says the text is trying to avoid?
It seems like it, but it's actually a crucial distinction in his theory. Bar is essentially the broader category. It's the genus, if we want to stick with the scientific analogy.
Oh, see.
Waleed notes that bar refers to any massive accumulation of water, regardless of its salinity.
So it's about the sheer size, not the chemical makeup.
Exactly. It can apply to an immense flowing sweet river, or it can apply to a massive, harsh, salty lake.
Okay, so every yam is a bar, but not every bar is a yam.
You nailed it. The sweet, massive Jordan River, for instance, is a bar, but the salty Dead Sea is a yam.
Wow. Okay, so applying this really strict taxonomy to the Exodus narrative, we immediately had a massive geographical roadblock for the traditional story.
A complete roadblock.
Yeah, because if Pharaoh and Waleed actually identifies the pharaoh historically as the tyrant Darius, right?
Yes, Darius.
Right. So if Darius is drowned in the Yam, he literally cannot be drowning in the Nile River.
Not under this linguistic rule, no. The Nile is sweet flowing water. It would be classified as ma, or a sweet bar.
And he also cannot be drowning in the Red Sea.
Exactly.
Because the Red Sea is this massive, open, global waterway connected directly to the Indian Ocean. It completely fails the definition of an enclosed, separated basin.
It fails it entirely. Waleed explicitly brings forward scientific and geographic evidence showing that a Red Sea crossing is just flat out impossible from either of its northern branches.
You mean the Gulf of Suez or the Gulf of Aqaba?
Right. Neither of those branches is a closed system. The only geographical feature in that entire region that perfectly satisfies this uncompromising definition of a yam, a bitter, salty, enclosed basin, is the Dead Sea.
It's the only one that fits the walk.
Exactly. It sits right there in the Jordan Rift Valley, basically acting as a natural border between modern-day Jordan and historical Palestine.
And it is a massive hypersaline sink with absolutely no outlet.
Right. Water flows in, but it never flows out.
And the Dead Sea is also famous for being the lowest elevation on land. Like the shores are about 400 meters below global sea level.
It's an incredibly unique geographical depression.
You're standing on a beach, but you are literally a quarter-mile beneath the surface of the Mediterranean Sea. It's wild. But Waleed points to something else about the Dead Sea, right? Something he calls a volumetric miracle.
Yeah, this is where his theory gets really specific with the numbers.
Because he claims the fixed water capacity of the Dead Sea is exactly 114 cubic kilometers.
That's the number he lands on.
Now, I have to challenge that immediately. I mean, the Dead Sea is famously evaporating.
Right, it's shrinking every year.
Yeah, its water levels fluctuate wildly based on, historical rainfall and obviously modern water diversion from the Jordan River. So how can Waleed possibly claim its volume is mathematically fixed at exactly 114 cubic kilometers?
It is a totally valid question because surface evaporation is a known historical reality there. But Waleed's argument here relies on the geological baseline of the basin itself.
Okay, independent of the water that's actually in it right now.
Right, independent of contemporary surface fluctuations. When he speaks of the 114 cubic kilometers, he is referring to the structural capacity of the natural basin up to its historical equilibrium point.
Equilibrium point, meaning what exactly?
Meaning, the point in ancient history where the natural inflow of fresh water from the Jordan River perfectly, naturally balanced the evaporation rate, long before modern human intervention diverted the river's feed.
Ah, okay. So he's talking about the maximum historical carrying capacity of that specific geological container.
Correct. And that specific number, 114 cubic kilometers, is highly central to his textual proof.
Why 114?
Because it perfectly mirrors the 114 surahs or chapters of the Quran.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, Waleed views this as physical evidence of divine intentionality. To him, the Dead Sea is not merely a salty geological anomaly.
It's like a physical vessel sized perfectly to reflect the spiritual vessel of the text itself.
Exactly. It establishes the Dead Sea as a uniquely significant, mathematically coded landscape in his view.
He's arguing that topography is a literal physical manifestation of the scripture. That really sets the stage.
It does.
But the text also frequently mentions this concept, the meeting of the two seas, Miraj al-Bahrain.
Yes, Miraj al-Bahrain.
And it describes two bodies of water meeting, one sweet and fresh, and one salty and bitter. Now, if we are locked into this tight regional map around the Dead Sea, he obviously can't be talking about, like, global oceans meeting at the southern tip of Africa.
No, he maps this phrase directly and specifically onto the Levant.
Okay, where exactly?
The meeting point is specifically where the sweet, fresh, fast-flowing waters of the Jordan River, which is the sweet Barrow, empty directly into the harsh, salty, enclosed basin of the Dead Sea.
The bitter Yam.
Exactly.
And the text explicitly mentions a barrier, right? A barzak between them. It says they meet, but they do not transgress one another.
Right. They touch but don't mix.
And if you look at the fluid dynamics of an estuary lake where a fast, fresh river hits a hypersaline lake, that actually makes perfect scientific sense.
It's totally scientifically sound.
Because the Dead Sea is roughly, 10 times saltier than the ocean?
It's incredibly dense.
Right, so when the fresh water of the Jordan River hits it, it doesn't just instantly homogenize and blend in.
No, you get what's called a halocline.
A halocline, right.
The sheer difference in specific gravity means the fresh water essentially floats on top of the dense brine for a period of time.
It literally sits on top.
Yeah, there is a distinct, measurable chemical and physical barrier there. The waters are physically touching, yet they remain totally separated by their own differing densities.
So Waleed argues this is a highly localized, highly visible hydrological phenomenon happening right there in the Jordan Valley.
Yes.
And it was just completely misidentified by later scholars who tried to map it onto, like, vast global oceans.
Exactly. He thinks they took a very local, observable scientific reality and blew it out of proportion.
So let's follow that thread for a second. If the terminology was originally so precise, if anyone living in that region at that time understood the Jordan River was the sweet bar and the Dead Sea was the Amhau, did an entire civilization misplace the most famous event in their history?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Like, how does the Red Sea myth take hold and dominate cartography for millennia?
Waleed attributes this massive geographical drift to subsequent generations, basically prioritizing external narratives over the internal logic of the text itself.
Okay, what do you mean by external narratives?
Well, he argues that as scholars moved further away in both time and geography from the original events, they began to force the text to fit geopolitical assumptions.
I see.
Because historical tradition heavily associated Pharaoh with the massive famous monuments of the Nile Delta in modern Egypt, later interpreters just stretched the geography to fit that image.
They assumed the crossing must have happened near the center of Egyptian power.
Right, so they projected the word Yam onto the Red Sea, completely ignoring the fact that the Red Sea fundamentally violates the physical properties of a closed basin.
They traded the strict physical definitions of the ancient vocabulary for the narrative convenience of the empire, basically.
Exactly. They turned what was essentially a technical geographic manual into a loose historical novel.
That is fascinating. But okay, if we accept Waleed's premise for a moment, and we relocate this entire saga to the Dead Sea, we run into a massive physics problem.
A huge one.
Because a shallow, closed lake doesn't just stand up in frozen walls of water. He has to completely rewrite the mechanics of the miracle itself, right?
And he absolutely does.
Yeah.
He completely rejects the cinematic image of static walls of water.
Charlton Heston is out.
Charlton Heston is definitely out. Waleed argues that such an image violates the physical laws of the universe, and more importantly, it contradicts the actual physical mechanisms that are detailed in the text itself.
It's like, how did they cross?
To understand how the sea parted, we have to look beneath the surface of the Dead Sea to its hidden topography.
Okay, because it's not just a uniform bowl-shaped crater down there.
Far from it. The Dead Sea is technically a separated basin. It features a very deep northern basin, which is where the Jordan River empties in, and a much, much shallower southern basin.
And between those two basins is the crucial geographic feature for Waleed's entire theory, right?
Yes.
There is a submerged landmass, a peninsula that juts out from the eastern shore in Jordan, pointing directly westward toward Palestine. It's called the Lisan, which I believe translates to the tongue.
Yes, the tongue. Ordinarily, this land bridge is completely submerged beneath the water. But Waleed identifies the Lisan as the actual physical stage for the crossing.
Okay.
He maps it to the Quranic phrase, Sabil Muqam, which translates to the residing or established path.
So it's not a path that was magically created out of nowhere. It is a permanent geological structure just lying in wait.
Exactly. It was always there.
Okay, so we have a submerged bridge. But how do you get the incredibly heavy, dense salt water off that bridge without magic?
Right. You have to move the water.
And the traditional narrative has Moses raise a wooden staff, strike the water, and the sea splits. But Waleed claims that wasn't a magic wand, right? He says it was an electromagnetic tool.
He does.
Now, I need to push back hard here. Are we talking about ancient batteries? Like, how exactly does striking water with a piece of wood generate an electromagnetic pulse capable of moving millions of tons of water?
It is definitely the most scientifically aggressive part of his entire theory.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But Waleed posits that the instruction to strike the sea was not just some symbolic gesture. It was a physical catalyst meant to activate a latent electromagnetic system within the staff itself.
Okay, but how?
In his theoretical framework, this isn't about the wood spontaneously generating a charge. It's about the staff interacting with the specific geomagnetic anomalies of the Syrian-African Rift Valley.
Oh, interesting. So the Rift Valley itself is a highly active tectonic and magnetic zone.
Yes, incredibly active. Waleed suggests the staff acted almost like an antenna or a grounding rod.
Okay.
And upon impact, it triggered a massive, highly localized discharge of electromagnetic energy.
So it tapped into the Earth's natural energy?
Right. And this sudden burst of energy violently ionized the air above the water, creating an instant extreme disruption in the local atmospheric pressure.
A massive localized low-pressure zone.
Exactly.
And basic physics tells us that extreme pressure differentials over a body of water don't push water into static frozen walls. They generate waterspouts.
Tornadoes.
Wow.
And Waleed points to the textual description that says each part was like a great tawd.
Tawd, T-A-W-D.
Yes. Now, a tawd is often translated as a towering mountain, but in the context of fluid dynamics and atmospheric pressure, Waleed interprets it as a towering vortex of water.
Oh, that makes so much sense visually.
Right. And because the Dead Sea is naturally divided into two distinct basins, this atmospheric disruption spawned two gigantic, counter-rotating water tornadoes.
Think about the mechanics of that for a second. One massive waterspout forms over the deep northern basin.
Right.
A second counter-rotating waterspout forms over the shallow southern basin. I'm picturing it like taking a shop vac nozzle to a shallow puddle on a concrete floor.
That's a perfect analogy.
Because a waterspout doesn't push water away like a snowplow, it possesses a low-pressure core that acts as a massive vacuum.
Exactly. The centrifugal force of these two colossal counter-rotating tornadoes generated an immense updraft.
Sucking the water up.
Because they were positioned to the north and south of the shallow basin, they began to violently vacuum the water upward and away from that central submerged shelf.
They are essentially pumping the water off the bridge and holding it in these terrifying, churning columns in the sky.
Yes.
This was a violent meteorological event that instantly exposed the hidden land bridge connecting the west, Palestine, directly to the east, Jordan.
And this specific mechanical requirement further invalidates the Red Sea theory for Waleed.
How so?
Because you cannot generate this kind of localized double vortex vacuum effect in the open expanse of the Red Sea or the Gulf of Aqaba.
Oh, I see.
The Red Sea is too deep, it's too open, and it lacks the necessary double basin topography with a shallow middle shelf.
Right, a waterspout in the Red Sea just moves water around an endless ocean. It doesn't uncover a dry path between two shores.
Exactly. The physics of the tawd absolutely require the unique closed system topography of the Dead Sea to actually function as a crossing.
That is just fascinating. Okay, so the Israelites cross this newly exposed, muddy but dry Lisan, and then Pharaoh's army, in pursuit, marches right onto the very same land bridge.
They walk right into the trap.
So what is the physical trigger for the drowning in this model? Does the atmospheric anomaly just end?
Pretty much, yeah. Once the Israelites reach the eastern shore, the eastern side of the rift in Jordan, the electromagnetic disruption just ceases.
It turns off.
The atmospheric pressure equalizes instantly, and without that extreme low pressure, the tornadoes lose the energy required to maintain their massive centrifugal spin.
And the collapse.
Completely.
So gravity just reasserts itself. Millions of tons of hyperdense salt water, primarily from the incredibly deep northern basin, suddenly has absolutely nothing supporting it in the sky.
Nothing at all.
It doesn't just passively fill back in like a bathtub. It crashes down and rushes southward over the shallow Lisan shelf, instantly obliterating Pharaoh's army with just sheer kinetic force.
It is a catastrophic release of potential energy. It would have been devastating.
Incredible.
But Waleed claims he doesn't just rely on meteorological physics to prove this localized mechanism.
Oh, there's more.
Yeah, he argues that the proof is literally encoded into the visual shape of the Arabic letters in the Quranic text itself.
Okay, now this borders on the esoteric. You are saying he reads the calligraphy as a topographical map.
I am.
Like, how does a two-dimensional letter on parchment provide a 3D bathymetric depth chart of the Dead Sea? Let's test the logic on this one.
It definitely requires looking at the orthography, which is, the conventional spelling and visual representation of the language.
Right.
Waleed focuses on the word yam again, the salty sea. And specifically, he looks at its final letter, the Arabic letter meme.
Okay, the letter meme.
In traditional Quranic script, the letter meme is not always written uniformly.
It changes shape.
Yeah. Sometimes its tail is written short, just tucked up close to the word. Other times, the tail is elongated, drawn out, and pointing straight downward.
So there are distinct visual variations of the exact same letter in the manuscript.
Yes. And Waleed discovered a consistent pattern. He correlates the visual length of the meme directly to the physical depths of the specific part of the Dead Sea being referenced in the narrative.
Wow. Okay, let's apply that to a specific story to see if it holds up. Let's take the origin story of Moses. His mother places him in a basket to hide him from Pharaoh's soldiers, and she casts him into the sea.
Right. The text states she was instructed to cast him into the Yam. But in the specific verses detailing this event, the word Yam is written with a short, tucked meme.
Visually representing shallow water.
Precisely. It is an orthographic marker of shallowness.
Okay.
And if we overlay this onto our new map of the Dead Sea, where is the shallow water?
It is the lisan, the submerged tongue.
Ex-
This fundamentally shifts our understanding of the geography of Pharaoh's court. Because if Moses' mother waded into the shallow waters of the lisan to cast the basket adrift,
Right.
and the text says the sea will cast him onto the shore to be found by Pharaoh's household.
Right.
That means Pharaoh's palace wasn't hundreds of miles away in the lush green Nile Delta. It places his seat of power right there on the arid western shores of the Dead Sea in ancient Palestine.
Which, from a logistical standpoint, for an ancient empire, having a seat of power near the Dead Sea Rift Valley actually makes a lot of sense for controlling trade routes between Africa and Asia.
Sure, economically it works.
But textually, it creates this brilliant narrative symmetry. The exact shallow shelf where Moses was cast adrift as a helpless infant is the precise location he will return to decades later, parting the waters over that very same shelf to defeat the pharaoh.
It's full circle. That is beautiful symmetry. Okay, so that accounts for the shallow water, the short neem. But what about the destruction of the army?
When Waleed analyzes the verses describing the drowning of Pharaoh's army, the orthography shifts entirely. The text says, "We drowned them in the Yam." But here, the final letter meme is elongated. It is drawn deeply downward.
Denoting deep water.
Yes. Because when the tornadoes collapsed, it wasn't the shallow water of the southern basin that destroyed the army. It was the billions of gallons of water from the abyssal depths of the northern basin rushing southward over the Lisan.
Unbelievable.
The elongated meme visually captures the crushing depth of those northern waters overwhelming the shallow shelf.
It is literal data visualization hidden in ancient ink.
It really is.
It implies that the original scribes, or, the divine author of the text, embedded geographic data into the very curvature of the letters themselves.
Which is a staggering level of textual density.
It's mind-blowing.
Okay.
And if we track the rest of Moses' journey using this hyper-localized Dead Sea map, it must drastically alter the entire Exodus route.
Radically.
Because if they cross the Dead Sea from west to east, from Palestine to Jordan, they aren't wandering in the massive Sinai Peninsula down in Egypt.
No, the entire map is completely compressed. Think about it. When Moses initially flees Pharaoh's territory on the western side of the Dead Sea, he flees east across the Rift Valley to Midian.
Okay, Midian.
We'll add maps Midian to Mount Sinai, which is in modern-day Jordan.
So he is already in Jordan. Then he returns west to Palestine to confront Pharaoh.
Right, and then he leads the Israelites back across the Dead Sea's lease, moving from west to east again, effectively returning to the safe haven of Jordan.
The geography is so tight.
It is, and Waleed finds physical, logical proof for this compressed location in the incident of the golden calf.
Oh, this is a great logistical detail. Remind us of the story.
So, while Moses is up on the mountain receiving the law, the Israelites down in the camp build an idol out of gold.
The golden calf.
Right. Moses returns, he sees it, and he destroys the idol in a rage. He brings it, grinds it up, and scatters its ashes into the sea.
Right. The text explicitly states he blows the ashes into the Yam.
Now, let's look at the traditional map for a second.
Okay, let's do it.
If they crossed the Red Sea and then marched for weeks into the deep, arid interior of the Sinai Desert, there is no massive body of water around.
Right. They would be surrounded by endless sand dunes and mountains.
Exactly. You literally cannot scatter ashes into a sea that is 100 miles behind you.
Unless you, carry the ashes in a bag for a month just to find a beach, which completely contradicts the immediacy and the anger of the narrative.
Right. It makes no physical or psychological sense.
He destroys it and immediately throws it in the water.
Exactly. But under Waleed's geography, it aligns perfectly. If they cross the Lisan and set up camp immediately on the eastern shore of the Dead Sea in Jordan, the Yam is right there.
It's literally steps away from their tents.
The logistics of destroying the idol and immediately casting its remnants into the bitter, salty water completely lock their physical location to the shores of the Dead Sea.
The puzzle pieces just fit together with alarming precision.
They really do.
But Waleed's grand unified theory goes even further than Moses, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, he's just getting started.
He takes this newly established Dead Sea matrix, and he uses it to reel in entirely different historical and religious events, basically proving that the ancient world was far more geographically centralized than we ever thought.
Everything happened in a much smaller radius.
Let's look at the biology of the fish. This is one of my favorite parts.
It's brilliant. So there is a narrative of Moses and his servant traveling together. And this is one of the more elusive geographic puzzles in traditional commentary.
Right. Nobody can seem to agree on where this happens.
Exactly. They're traveling, they stop to rest by a rock, and the dead fish they brought along for sustenance miraculously revives and slips away into the sea.
The text states it took its course into the sea amazingly.
Right. Now, commentators have tried to place this event everywhere, from the Mediterranean coast to, the junction of the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aqaba.
Just guessing, basically.
Total mythological guesswork. But Waleed ignores all of that and focuses squarely on the biology of the specific fish species mentioned in the historical regional context.
Okay, what fish are we talking about?
He identifies the specific fish native to that immediate ecosystem. We're talking about the green tilapia zili, the tilapia galilea, the Barbus logiceps, and the red gararufa.
Okay, now these are highly specific, exclusively freshwater species native to the Jordan River Valley.
Exactly, freshwater.
Let's talk about the biological mechanics of osmoregulation for a second.
Oh, this is the nail in the coffin.
Right, because a freshwater fish operates by constantly expelling excess water from its body to maintain a balance with its less salty environment.
Right, it's constantly regulating.
The Dead Sea, on the other hand, is a hypersaline death trap. It is roughly 34% salinity.
It's toxic to them.
Yeah, if a freshwater fish gets swept into the Dead Sea, the osmotic pressure instantly reverses. The incredibly dense salt water violently sucks the moisture out of the fish's cells, causing massive cellular plasmolysis. It literally dies in seconds.
It absolutely cannot survive in the yam.
Right.
Therefore, Waleed argues, Moses and his servant must have caught these specific fish in the flowing sweet waters of the Jordan River.
The sweet bar.
The sweet bar. And for the fish to slip away into water and actually survive, they must have been resting at a location directly adjacent to fresh water right before it hits the deadly salinity of the Dead Sea.
Which brings us right back to the Miraj al-Bahrain, the meeting of the two seas.
Exactly.
They are in the Jordan River Valley, but the text says they rested by the rock. And in a landscape filled with literally millions of boulders, Waleed identifies this as one very specific, world-famous geological feature, right?
He does. By tracking ancient travel routes from the Jordan River westward up into the hills, he identifies the rock as the Blessed Rock in Jerusalem.
The foundation stone.
Yes, the very stone which today sits inside the dome of the rock on the Temple Mount.
Now wait, that is a massive hike. The Jordan River Valley is well below sea level, and Jerusalem is up in the Judean mountains, roughly 800 meters above sea level. It's a steep, arduous ascent.
It is a serious climb, but it follows the established ancient trade and pilgrimage routes from the Rift Valley straight up into the highlands.
So it's a known path.
Very much so. Waleed is arguing that Moses' journey wasn't just aimless wandering in a featureless desert. It was anchored to deeply significant geological and spiritual landmarks.
The map makes logical sense.
And he anchors one more major historical narrative to this exact same rock.
Ah, the Seven Sleepers.
The Al-Kaf, yes.
This is the famous story of young men fleeing a tyrannical pagan king. They take refuge in a cave and are miraculously put to sleep for over 300 years, waking up in a future where their society has completely changed.
It's a hugely popular story with a lot of competing claims.
Right. Like tourist traps in Turkey and Syria both claim to have the real cave. How does Waleed tie them to Jerusalem?
He traces their geographical origin in the text. The text connects the sleepers to a place called Ar-Rakum. Now, while traditionally that's merely translated as an inscription, Waleed utilizes historical geography to identify Ar-Rakum as the ancient rock-cut city of Petra.
Petra, located in modern-day Jordan, east of the Dead Sea Rift.
Exactly. And Petra is carved directly into the sandstone cliffs. It fits the aesthetic and historical context of the story perfectly.
But they don't stay in Petra.
No, they are fleeing persecution in the east. Waleed posits that they migrate westward, crossing the Rift Valley, climbing into the highlands of Palestine, and seeking the ultimate spiritual and physical refuge.
Okay, where did they go?
They hide inside a natural subterranean cavern. And Waleed identifies that cavern as the specific cave located directly beneath the Blessed Rock in Jerusalem.
Oh, wow. For you listeners who might not be familiar with the architecture of the Temple Mount, there is literally a massive natural cave directly underneath the foundation stone.
Yes, there is.
It is known as the Well of Souls. It has ancient origins, natural fault lines, and definitely enough space to hide a small group of people.
It perfectly satisfies all the physical and geographic requirements of the text.
It's amazing. Waleed synthesis pulls all of these disparate narratives, Moses' origin on the shallow Lisan, the destruction of Pharaoh by the counter-rotating waterspouts, the biological anomaly of the freshwater fish at the Jordan estuary, and the multi-century slumber of the youths fleeing Petra. He pulls it all into one incredibly tight, interconnected geographical radius.
He completely collapses a map that traditionally spanned thousands of miles across Egypt, the Red Sea in Asia Minor, and centralizes the entire ancient universe right around the Jordan River Valley and the Dead Sea.
It is a staggering feat of textual forensic analysis. Honestly, by simply demanding that a salty closed basin must actually be a salty closed basin, he erases the Red Sea crossing entirely.
It really highlights a profound vulnerability in human history, don't you think?
What do you mean?
Well, we place enormous trust in the cartographers and translators in antiquity. But if they allow the precise definition of a single word like yam to slip...
If they let it get blurry.
Right. If they allow a strict geographic descriptor to become a vague poetic synonym, they can accidentally relocate entire empires and completely misplace monumental historical events.
It's terrifying, honestly. Which leaves us with a truly fascinating question to carry with us today.
Definitely.
If Dr. Waleed is right, if the most famous body of water in historical antiquity is entirely wrong just because someone, somewhere along the line, forgot how to accurately read the landscape encoded in the language.
Makes you wonder.
It really does. What other historical maps are we blindly trusting right now? What other lost cities, epic battles, or ancient migrations are we searching for in the wrong deserts and the completely wrong oceans, all because we assume a word means one thing when the ancients meant something entirely different?
It's a huge question.
It proves that sometimes the greatest historical mysteries aren't buried deep underground. They are hiding in plain sight, trapped inside the definitions of the words we use every single day. Keep questioning the map, everyone. We'll see you next time.